to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where your only task is to rest, and where a gentle tale will carry you across a quiet bridge in early spring into a place of soft water, pale blossoms, and peaceful, lingering wonder. Settle into whatever position feels kindest. Let your shoulders sink as if warm hands have smoothed the day away. Allow your jaw to loosen, your tongue to rest, and your brow to soften like cloth laid flat. If it helps, take a slow breath in through your nose, and then let it drift out through your mouth, unhurried, as though you're fogging a window with calm. With each breath, imagine the noise of the world becoming more distant. The sharp edges of thoughts grow rounded. The weight of plans, lists, and unfinished sentences slips gently from your grip. You do not need to solve anything tonight. You do not need to hold anything up. Picture a soft hour that belongs to early spring, when winter has not fully departed but has begun to relax its hold. The air is cool and clean, and it tastes faintly of wet stone and new green. Somewhere nearby, water moves with a hush that is almost musical, and you can feel, even before you see it, that there is a bridge ahead. Quiet, waiting, and welcoming. Take one more slow breath. Let your eyelids feel heavy, as if they are made of velvet. And when you're ready, let the story begin to walk on its own while you simply listen. In a small valley where the hills curved like resting animals and the sky often wore a shawl of pearly cloud, there was an old bridge. It was not famous, and it did not appear on bright postcards. It did not boast grand arches or carved statues. It simply belonged to the land, the way a tree belongs to its meadow or a stone belongs to its stream. The bridge was made of pale gray stone, worn smooth by time and weather. Some of its blocks were flecked with quartz that caught the light in tiny, quiet sparkles. A low parapet lined either side, just high enough to lean on comfortably, just sturdy enough to feel safe. In the center, the stones formed a subtle rise, a gentle hump that made the crossing feel like a slow breath in and out. Beneath it flowed a narrow river, not loud or wild, but steady, confident, and calm. In early spring, the water was clear enough to reveal the riverbed's rounded pebbles, many in muted shades, dove gray, moss green, honey brown. The current made them glimmer as if the stones were remembering sunlight. On one bank of the river, a path wound down from a village that rested on the hillside. The village was small, the kind of place where roofs were close enough to share warmth and chimneys sent up thin ribbons of smoke that never hurried. The houses were built of timber and stone, and some had window boxes where hardy plants waited patiently for the season to soften. A bell in a modest tower marked the hours, but it never sounded sharp. It seemed to ring with an understanding that time could be gentle. On the other bank, the path continued into a stretch of woods. Those woods were neither dark nor threatening. They were simply quiet, filled with thin-trunked birches and early budding maples, and a few evergreens that had held their color through winter's long hush. In the woods, the first signs of spring were subtle. Little buds, like tiny promises along branches, new grass spearing up in sheltered places, and a faint sweetness in the air as though the earth had begun to warm from within. In this valley, early spring did not arrive with fanfare. It arrived like a soft song hummed in another room. It was easy to miss if one rushed. But if someone walked slowly, if they listened, if they allowed their gaze to soften and widen, they could feel it everywhere. One evening, on a day that had been washed clean by a light rain, a traveler came along the path from the village. The traveler was neither hurried nor lost, simply moving as though there was nowhere else to be. They wore a cloak the color of bark, and beneath it a scarf of woven wool in gentle faded hues, mist blue, pale moss, warm oatmeal. Their boots were sturdy but well worn, and they stepped with a kind of quiet respect, as if the ground itself deserved kindness. The traveler had been in the village for a short while, long enough to drink tea by a hearth, and to hear a few simple stories passed from one voice to another. In small places like that, stories did not fly or shout. They settled like feathers. They warmed like bread. And one story in particular had been shared with a soft smile and a lowered tone, the way people speak of something that feels half real, half dream. It was the story of the quiet bridge. "Go there at early spring," an elder had said, fingers wrapped around a cup. Not to do anything, not to ask for anything, just to stand. The bridge listens, they say. And when it listens, you remember how to be quiet inside. The traveler had nodded as though they understood. Perhaps they did. Or perhaps they simply liked the sound of it. A bridge that listened, a place that offered quiet like a gift. In any case, after thanking the village for its warmth, the traveler had stepped back into the cool evening. The rain had stopped and the world glistened, every leaf and stone holding tiny beads of water that caught the last of the day's light. As the traveler approached the bridge, the sky shifted into its dusk colors. Pale apricot near the horizon, then lavender, then a deepening blue that felt like velvet laid across the world. The river mirrored those tones, making the valley feel doubled, as if there were two skies, one above and one drifting slowly beneath the bridge's arch. Birdsong softened as night came on. A few late notes fluttered and then fell quiet. From the woods came the small, comforting sounds of creatures settling. The whisper of leaves, the soft creak of a branch, the distant rustle of something tiny making its way through undergrowth. The traveler reached the first stones of the bridge and slowed, not out of caution, but out of instinct. There was something about the bridge that asked for calm. The stones seemed to hold their own quiet, and stepping onto them felt like entering a room where someone was sleeping peacefully. One did not want to disturb anything. Each footstep was muted. The air on the bridge felt slightly cooler, as if the river's breath rose up and brushed the traveler's cheeks. The scent here was fresh and mineral, and beneath it lingered the faint sweetness of damp earth. Halfway across, the traveler paused. They rested their hands on the parapet, palms against stone. The surface was cool and smooth, warmed in the smallest way by the day's earlier light. It felt steady, it felt patient. The traveler looked down at the water. In the center of the river, the current quickened slightly, and the surface wrinkled with small ripples that caught the fading sky. A drift of petals, pale, almost white, spun slowly in a gentle eddy. Somewhere upstream, an early blossom tree had begun to open, and the river had borrowed a few of its offerings. A single petal slid in circles for a while, as if undecided, and then drifted onward, carried quietly into the woods. The traveler listened. First, there was only the river, that continuous hush. But as the traveler remained still, other sounds emerged, subtle and layered. A drop of water fell from the underside of the parapet with a soft plink. A breeze moved through the birch branches, making a faint, brushing sound like a hand smoothing fabric. In the distance, the village bell offered a single tone, soft, rounded, not demanding attention, more like a reminder that the world was still there and steady. The traveler's shoulders lowered. Their breath deepened without effort. Something inside them unclenched, the way a fist opens in sleep. They had not realized how much noise they carried until the bridge met them with silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that felt spacious. The kind that allowed thoughts to float by without needing to be caught. In that quiet, the traveler began to notice the bridge more closely. Along the stone, tiny patches of lichen made gentle maps. Pale green, soft silver, faint gold. In one corner, a small tuft of moss had gathered, lush and bright in the dim light, as if it had been keeping spring's secret all winter long. Near the center, carved into the parapet, were faint marks, old scratches, worn initials, perhaps a symbol or two. Time had softened them so much they looked like the ghost of a message rather than a clear statement. The traveler traced one of the marks with a fingertip. It felt like touching a memory. And then, in the way of quiet places, something happened so gently it was almost not a happening at all. A lantern appeared. It was not dramatic. No burst of light, no sudden flare. The lantern was simply there, resting on the parapet a few steps away, as though it had always belonged there and the traveler had only just noticed it. It was a small lantern made of metal with a glass pane, and inside it a flame glowed, steady and calm. The light was warm, honey-colored, and it did not push against the dark. It softened it. It made the dusk feel kinder, as if night itself had decided to be gentle. The traveler turned their head slowly. There were no footsteps behind them, no sign of anyone approaching. The path on the village side was empty, and the woods on the far side lay quiet and still. For a moment, the traveler simply looked at the lantern. The flame did not flicker wildly. It held as though protected by an unseen hand. Then, as if answering a question the traveler had not spoken aloud, a voice came, soft, low, and calm. Not from behind or beside, but from the air itself, as though the valley were speaking. Some places keep their own light, the voice said, almost like a thought. And some travelers are meant to find it. The traveler did not feel afraid. The voice carried no sharpness, no urgency. It felt like the river's hush, translated into words. "Who are you?" the traveler asked. And even that question sounded gentle on the bridge, as though it had been wrapped in wool. There was a pause, the kind of pause that gives comfort rather than tension. "Only a keeper," the voice said at last. "Not of gates, not of rules, a keeper of quiet. This bridge does not need much. It only needs to remain what it is." The traveler looked again at the lantern. The flame's light made small reflections in the glass, tiny stars that seemed to shift when the traveler breathed. "I heard the bridge listens," the traveler said. "It does," the voice replied. "Not to confessions, not to wishes. It listens the way water listens to stone, the way trees listen to wind. It listens until the mind grows tired of speaking, and then you can hear what is underneath." The traveler remained leaning on the parapet. The river moved, patient and unbroken. A new cluster of petals drifted under the bridge, swirling in a slow spiral. Something about them, pale as moonlight, made the traveler's thoughts slow further, as if each petal carried a tiny piece of calm. "May I cross?" the traveler asked, though they were already on the bridge, already in the middle of it. The voice sounded almost amused, but softly so. "You may," it said, "but you need not hurry. The bridge is not a test. It is a pause. Take what you came for." The traveler's gaze lifted from the water to the woods beyond. In the dimness, the trees stood like quiet sentinels. The path that led into them was visible, a soft ribbon of earth, slightly darker than the new grass at its edges. At the entrance to the woods, someone, perhaps villagers, had tied a simple strand of pale cloth to a branch, and it moved faintly in the breeze like a slow wave. The traveler took a deep breath. It felt easy. It felt natural, as though the bridge had taught their lungs to remember what calm was. Then they straightened and took a few steps toward the lantern. The lantern's light did not brighten the whole bridge. It only created a small circle of warmth around itself. Within that circle, the stone seemed to glow from within. Outside it, dusk remained soft and blue. The traveler reached out and gently lifted the lantern by its handle. It was warm, but not hot. The flame inside continued steady, as if it trusted the traveler. "What should I do with this?" the traveler asked. "Carry it," the voice said. "Not to light the way. The path knows where it goes, carry it to remind yourself that even a small warmth can be enough. The traveler nodded. The lantern's light moved with them as they took another step, then another, until they reached the far end of the bridge. Here the air smelled more strongly of the woods, damp bark, leaf mold, the faint sweetness of sap rising. The traveler paused at the last stone, as if reluctant to leave the bridge's calm. "I can feel it," they said quietly. "The quiet inside, it's larger than I remembered." "It is always there," the voice replied, "but the world lays things on top of it. You have been carrying more than you need." The traveler's hand tightened slightly on the lantern handle, not from tension, but from gratitude. There were many ways to say thank you, and none of them seemed necessary. The bridge did not ask for thanks. It simply was. The traveler stepped off the bridge and onto the woodland path. At once, the woods welcomed them with their gentle closeness. The trees formed an arch overhead, not heavy or oppressive, but sheltering, like the curved palm of a hand. The lantern's small light made the nearest trunks glow softly and turned the wet leaves underfoot into dark, shining shapes. As the traveler walked, the path rose slightly and then leveled. The ground was soft, and the traveler's steps made a muted sound, like a whisper. The river remained nearby, sometimes visible through the trees, sometimes only present as sound. The traveler noticed how the river's voice changed, sometimes a smooth hush, sometimes a light murmur where it passed over stones. The further the traveler went, the more the woods seemed to breathe. A breeze moved through high branches, and the canopy whispered. Somewhere, an owl offered a single low call. Not startling, simply acknowledging night. After a while, the path opened onto a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a pond, round and still, like a dark mirror laid carefully in the earth. Around its edges, reeds stood like slender brushes. The pond's surface reflected the lantern's light in a soft ribbon. Beside the pond there was a bench made from a fallen tree, smoothed and placed with care. It looked as though it had been waiting for a long time, but without impatience. The traveler approached the bench and sat down. They placed the lantern on the ground beside them, where it cast a warm circle that touched their boots and the lower edge of their cloak. The flame hummed quietly, like a tiny heart. The traveler looked at the pond. A thin mist hovered above its surface, almost invisible, and it moved in slow patterns, like breath on a cold morning. As the traveler watched, they realized the mist did not move randomly. It seemed to gather and drift in a way that felt purposeful, as though it were listening too. On the far side of the pond, a small willow leaned slightly, its branches beginning to show the first hints of tender green. Each new leaf was like a soft word spoken after a long silence. The traveler's eyelids began to feel heavier. The day's journey and the bridge's calm were wrapping around them like a blanket. Then from the mist above the pond, something shimmered. It was not a sudden shape, not a dramatic figure. It was a soft glow like moonlight caught caught in a veil. It gathered slowly, forming a presence that felt more like a feeling than a person. In the lantern's warm light, the shimmer looked pearly and pale, like the inside of a shell. It hovered just above the pond's surface, and as it moved, the mist swirled gently as though the presence were stirring it with invisible hands. The traveler watched with calm curiosity. Nothing in the woods felt threatening. Even the unknown felt soft. The presence drifted closer to the bank, and as it did, the traveler heard something. No words, not exactly, but a melody. It was faint and simple, like a lullaby hummed by someone who'd been singing to the valley for centuries. The melody rose and fell, slow as a tide. The traveler's breathing matched it without effort. The presence paused near the pond's edge, and for a moment it seemed to lean toward the traveler as if noticing them. The traveler did not speak. They simply allowed the moment to be what it was. The melody continued, and within it, the traveler began to sense images, soft impressions like dreams forming. They saw the bridge not as it was now, but as it had been long ago, when it was newly built and the stones were sharp-edged. They saw hands placing each block carefully, fitting them together with patience. They sensed the intention behind the building, not just to cross the river, but to connect two parts of the valley, to make travel gentle, to invite meeting. They saw people crossing in different seasons, summer with baskets of berries, autumn with armfuls of firewood, winter with scarves pulled tight, and spring with pockets full of seeds. The bridge held them all, never asking who they were or where they were going. It simply offered itself. The traveler saw a child once, long ago, standing at the center of the bridge, leaning over the parapet, watching petals drift. The child's laughter had been quiet, as if even then they knew the bridge liked soft sounds. The images shifted, and the traveler felt the bridge listening to footsteps, to sighs, to whispered conversations, to the long silence of snowfall. Listening, always listening, until it learned the shape of every sound and the comfort beneath it. And in that learning, something gentle had awakened, like a spirit, made not of magic fireworks, but of accumulated calm, a spirit born from patience and time, and the simple act of holding steady. The traveler's gaze drifted down to their hands, resting loosely in their lap. They noticed how relaxed their fingers were, how their palms were open, as if they had stopped grasping. They realized their thoughts were quieter too, not gone, but softened, like clouds that have thinned. The presence above the pond shimmered again, as if pleased. The melody grew a touch clearer, and within it, the traveler sensed an invitation. Not to do anything grand, not to speak a vow, simply to remember. Remember the feeling of cool stone under the palms. Remember the sound of water moving without worry. Remember the way spring arrives without forcing itself. The traveler closed their eyes for a moment, letting the melody wash through them. When they opened their eyes again, the presence had drifted slightly closer, It was still a shimmer, still mist and light, but now it seemed to hold a shape like a cloak made of moonlit fog. Within it, there were soft points of brightness like distant stars. The traveler felt a sudden, quiet understanding. This was the bridge's keeper, or perhaps the valley's, or perhaps the keeper belonged to all places that held stillness. Names were not important. What mattered was the sense of being cared for by something that asked nothing in return. The traveler spoke softly, as one might speak in a library or beside someone sleeping. Will the bridge always be there? The presence did not answer with words. Instead, the melody changed slightly, and the traveler understood the answer as a feeling. The bridge would be there as long as it was needed, and perhaps even longer. Stone could last, quiet could last. And even if one day the bridge wore down and the river took some of its stones, the idea of it, the pause, the listening, would remain in the valley, in the river, in the path. The traveler's eyelids drooped again. The bench was comfortable, the lantern's warmth steady. The mist above the pond swirled slowly, painting patterns that felt like slow breathing. Somewhere nearby, a small frog offered a single, sleepy croak, then fell quiet again. In the trees, a branch creaked and settled. The woods seemed to be settling too, tucking itself in for the night. The traveler leaned back slightly against the bench's smooth wood, their cloak wrapped around them, and the air, though cool, felt gentle. The lantern's light was like a small hearth, and the pond's mist like a blanket. The melody continued softer now, as if it were becoming part of the night itself. In that softened space, the traveler's mind began to drift into simple thoughts. Warm tea by the village fire, the smell of bread, the sound of rain earlier in the day. These thoughts did not demand attention. They floated by like petals on the river. The traveler's breathing slowed. Their shoulders loosened further. Their hands rested heavy and calm. And as the traveler drifted, the presence above the pond seemed to expand slightly, becoming less a shape and more a gentle glow in the mist. It was as if it were returning to where it belonged, into the woods, into the water, into the quiet. The lantern's flame remained steady, but its light seemed softer, as though it too was becoming sleepy. Shadows around the clearing grew a little deeper, but not frightening. They were simply the shadows of night, natural and kind. After a long while, though time in such places did not feel like counting, the traveler stirred slightly, not fully waking, just shifting. Their eyes opened halfway, and they looked toward the path that led back to the bridge. A thought came, slow and gentle. Perhaps it was time to return, not because they had to, but because the bridge had given them what it could, and now the quiet belonged inside them. The traveler reached for the lantern handle, lifting it carefully. The flame did not protest. It glowed softly, as if content to be carried again. They stood, and for a moment they looked at the pond. The mist had thinned, and the presence was no longer distinct. But the clearing still felt touched by something peaceful, as if the air itself had learned a lullaby. The traveler bowed their head slightly, not to anyone in particular, but to the quiet itself. And then they began to walk back along the path. The woods were even calmer now. The trees stood in a hush that felt like a deep exhale. The river's sound guided the traveler like a thread. Soon, through the branches, the bridge came into view. In the lantern's warm light, the stone looked almost silver blue, as though it held moonlight in its pores. The traveler stepped onto the bridge again, and once more their footsteps softened. The bridge felt the same, steady, patient, listening. At the center, the traveler paused. They set the lantern on the parapet exactly where it had appeared before, as if returning it to its home. For a moment, the traveler rested their hands on the stone again. They looked down at the water, where petals still drifted in slow, easy patterns. The river did not rush. The river did not worry. It simply moved, and in moving it made a song. The traveler listened one last time, letting the sound settle them. The voice returned, barely more than a whisper, as if it did not want to disturb the night. "Carry it gently," it said. The quiet, not as something to protect with effort, but as something to remember with ease. The traveler nodded, though no one needed to see. The understanding was inside them now, as simple as breath. They walked off the bridge toward the village side, moving slowly. The lantern remained behind, glowing softly in its spot, a small warm star on the stone. As the traveler climbed the path, the village lights appeared, little windows shining like amber squares. Smoke rose faintly from chimneys, and the scent of wood smoke and supper lingered in the air, comforting and familiar. The traveler's steps grew slower still, not from fatigue, but from the gentle pull of sleep. Their body felt heavy in the best way, as if it had finally been given permission to rest. Behind them, the bridge remained quiet. The river continued its soft song. The woods cradled the pond in its mist. Early spring held everything in a tender balance. Winter's last coolness and spring's first green. Night's hush and morning's promise. And now, as the story begins to soften and fade, the scene grows quieter too. The traveler reaches a small room in the village, simple, warm, and dim. A bed waits with blankets that smell faintly of sun and clean cloth. The traveler sets down their cloak, sits for a moment, and then lies back, letting the day slip away. Outside, the valley breathes. The river hushes. The quiet bridge listens. Everything slows. Breath in and out. Thoughts drift like petals. Sounds grow distant. The body becomes pleasantly heavy. The traveler's eyes close. The room is still. The night is kind. And you, listening now, can allow the same softness to spread through you, through your shoulders, your chest, your arms, your hands, down through your belly, your hips, your legs, and all the way to your feet. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. Only rest The bridge remains in your mind like a gentle image. Pale stone, slow water, early blossoms, a lantern glow that never demands, only comforts. Your breathing is steady, your thoughts are quiet, you are safe. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.